Good afternoon, my name is Alex Mortimer. I'm a director here at the Supply Chain Academy and CP Training Services Limited. Welcome to our 9th podcast. We welcome back Professor Tazeeb Rajwani, Head of Executive Education at Essex Business School at the University of Essex. Previously, we've talked about innovation, strategy, productivity. So we're just welcoming Tazeeb back so we can talk a little bit more about what is happening in the economy at this present time. Taz, welcome back.
Hi, thank you very much, Alex.
Good to see you again, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to come and see us here at the Academy. So what is going on out there in the economy at the moment?
So what I'm seeing at the moment is there is a lot of, let's say, growth happening in terms of Europe in general. So I think in terms of how we're observing the different markets across Europe, we're seeing still a lot of positivity in terms of capital markets, and Europe in general seems to be overall moving in the right direction. I think in terms of where the UK economy is, it's looking a little bit rocky in terms of the way the different parts of the kind of UK economy is working in terms of industries. We're noticing the current figures recently that came out that the UK economy is growing to some degree, but in light of Brexit, as we know, and the challenges now coming out from Syria, for example, are creating a lot of volatility in the market. So we're seeing a lot of flatlining in the capital markets, as we've seen with the FTSE recently, and that volatility is here to stay, and companies have priced that into their decision making. But I think overall, Europe's looking in better shape relative to the UK. But I'm feeling optimistic about the UK in terms of its industrial strategy and innovation and potential approach to productivity over the next several years.
Brilliant. I mean, over the last few podcasts, we've talked about manufacturing, we've talked about innovation, but we've also talked about the kind of growth that's happening, especially in the first quarter. Are you seeing any particular issues or challenges that these companies might have in the future?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing, after speaking to different executives in the East region of the UK, is that investments into innovation are happening, and obviously governments spending a lot of money through grants to improve productivity and helping to contribute to the overall goal of driving growth across the UK. So I think innovation is happening in different forms in the UK through private sectors in terms of R&D spend, and then public sector is trying to support and encourage innovation. But what I see is that that money that's potentially available is not being accessed in different ways. I mean, just for example, if you take the funds available for training, in terms of the apprenticeship levy, I have noticed that it can effectively boost the UK economy and help to think more productively. But the problem is companies are not tapping into that. I think around still 90% of those funds haven't been accessed. So I think opportunities are there in multiple ways, whether it's through R&D grants, whether it's through loans, whether it's through subsidies to meet those expectations. But I think we're not seeing the businesses exploit that.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, talking to business, I'm concerned that some organisations aren't really kind of thinking innovatively or actually thinking about how they can grow their business, and they're still working on a day-to-day basis and not thinking long-term about strategy and just growing their business. They're just doing what they've always done, and if you do what you've always do, you're not going to get any different changes in your business. You need results. You need to be different. I mean, what do we say to businesses? How do we encourage them to kind of take hold of these opportunities to get their people thinking differently?
Very good question there. I think boosting innovation requires firms to have a realistic conversation about what genuinely are they trying to get out of these different opportunities out there that the government are giving them. So I think it's about having a realistic proposition, but companies have to have the right culture and mindset. I think if the executive team are not ready and they're not willing to change. Evidence suggests that potentially at some point they will fail. And I think the key lessons here that I've learned from looking at small, medium-sized enterprises to large companies is that the evidence suggests you've got to be reinventing and investing into the different processes and activities through education, through training, through building new thinking in the organization. And I think if companies are concerned with those kinds of key questions about how to innovate, where to innovate, what resources and capabilities they should develop to win through innovation, I think ultimately they will succeed. And several studies show that companies that are able to tap into new ways of thinking through executive training and development, and if they're able to also tap into the grants available out there and investing in R&D, chances are they will succeed and genuinely create a positive impact in the economy and improve the productivity and performance of their companies through sales and profits.
Perfect. When we talked about in the last podcast around the Kodaks of this world, the Blackberries, the Toys R Us's, where did they go wrong, Taz?
I think a lot of these things that go wrong is down to not organizing sometimes their innovation. Sometimes it's down to the executive team relying a lot on what used to work. So you kind of go back to the processes and activities that were driving success kind of 5-10 years before that. But what research shows is that you have to kind of generate and absorb new innovations to kind of drive high knowledge businesses these days. And it's about thinking in a more kind of adaptive agility kind of perspective. And it's important to spend money in innovation and in executive education and training, and thinking about improving the workforce skills and leveraging the cities that are attractive to high knowledge firms, making sure that they have the capacity and the willingness to innovate. And ultimately, if they don't have those factors, then chances are they're going to struggle at some point.
No, indeed. Let's go back to that point. Creating a culture of adopting an agility perspective. How does an organization create staff that are able to adapt and become more agile in their very nature?
Yeah, very good question. So what research shows is that building agility and adaptation requires companies to make few changes. One change could be about simple things like routines and processes, where they might have a lot of structures and hierarchy and systems, and sometimes these things become rigid and get stuck. Companies build these things and it becomes like what I like to call a solidification. So it's like things harden and you find it difficult to change because it's just become the way we do things around here. This is what executives keep telling me all the time. Taz, this is what we've been doing for the last 5 years and it's worked really well. And then, we can just keep looking at so many companies that are stuck in the old way of thinking, and it requires them to think about softer symbolic dimensions of change management, right? So you got to think about rituals, you've got to think about leadership, you've got to think about those mechanisms, those control mechanisms that help firms to be more agile. And I think if you're able to make some small changes, incremental changes in the way you organize yourself, the way you have meetings, the way you prioritize your values, the way you start to make people think and you empower them, then chances are they will make the decisions faster. And if you make faster decisions and people are accountable, then I think chances are you will have more agility.
Perfect. That's good. So what I'm hearing is that they've got to make small incremental changes, maybe have some change champions in there, those that can influence sideways across the business, to motivate, to empower staff, to make decisions more effectively, quicker, and just being entrepreneurial in their approach, and contribute to the bottom line slowly, but over a period of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's some of the ways of bringing about the change that we want people to see.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key ways of unlocking UK productivity. I think the other way is through innovation, but also internationalization. I think if these companies, whether the SMEs or large companies, research shows that UK companies sometimes are failing and kind of falling behind some of the European partners when it comes to internationalization and entering new markets. And I think the more strategic companies are to the way they approach internationalization and entry into new markets, the better it will be. And sometimes that's by engaging with universities, whether it's through support and education. Sometimes it's about just having the right programs in place in companies where they're able to think about going into new markets, whether that's by having mentors or peers or thinking about those things more strategically.
Perfect. That's really good to hear, and enlightening for a leader, a business leader, or a senior director team to really listen and engage with this kind of thinking. I want to bring a little bit, a few other things into light in this conversation because it's getting really interesting. Around blockchain, 3D printing, AI, big data. Okay, we've obviously got a new program on this, and it's quite exciting because we're ahead of the curve. And how do we get our business leaders engaged into thinking around these new challenges, disruption challenges now? How do we get them thinking about it now, not when they're in the mess or further down the line, but now? How do we get them involved?
I think the way I look at it is about developing design skills, and designing the future. And companies that are thinking about not only the current activities, but if they're investing some time and effort in designing the future activities and are able to think about what does the future economy look like in the UK, then they can start thinking about developing the right skills for productivity and innovation. And a lot of the research that I've read and I've written about is really about thinking about the design skills, occupations of the future, thinking about these ideas of blockchain, thinking about AI, thinking about the digital aspects, of the company. And once you can think about this ecosystem and how the future industries are going to evolve, you can start to think about the importance. And the question is, do you want to be part of the future as a company, or do you want to become like a Kodak? And I think companies that are able to understand the pace of development in the digital space, the technological space, the research shows that this disruption is not just a fad. It really is disrupting companies, whether it's 3D printing, whether it's vertical farming, whether it's down to AI. Tomorrow's innovative companies are the ones that are investing in expertise and skills for the future, and they have a strategic approach to building specialisms around this area of industrial revolution. And the future skills that companies need to think about are really about the principles and practices around design thinking, thinking about innovation and accelerating innovation in their companies. And our program is designed in a way to take the executives to think about these variety of industries that are intensive, becoming a lot more graphic, a lot more digital, and autonomous technology, robotics are becoming also part of that conversation.
Fantastic. Taz, it's been great speaking to you. I really appreciate your time. It's always great to have a familiar family face back at the Academy. We really appreciate your collaboration with us. Just one final note, we have an event on the 21st of June, Leading in the Digital World, which looks at all of the details around AI, blockchain, big data, and every aspect of the digital world. For more details, please have a look at our website under the events section. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation, Alex.